Yeah, see, I'm gonna have to do my video like this. Woosah. I'm your girl, Honey Jones from Adidas Radio. And I'm sitting here reading a book because I keep getting fired from jobs. And it don't be my fault of getting fired wrongfully, but because of racism, I'm not getting heard. So I'm a political activist. I also stand up against injustices. Used to fight with a bunch of organizations until I realized that they're not ready to take the necessary approaches to get injustice. They stuck on some process, stuck conditions, stuck, trying to go around it, like stuck on their own selfish needs. So, with that being said, I just want to let y'all know that I'm reading a book called The Search for Freedom, because you can get so involved in this work that you start feeling unfree. And so my mind had been messed up about losing the job again, another one. So since November, I done had 4 jobs, and I was only there for probably about a month before I was being blamed for stuff and being voted off the island like I was the weakest link or something. So I was told that I intimidate a lot of people because of my energy, my spirit, my attitude, my look. And so that's possibly why I was voted off the jobs. So anyway, this is what I'm trying to learn about me too. So I'm taking heed to everything I read because they're messages for me. And so it says adults widely expand their vocabularies, learn to drive, get married, go to work, have families, and perform any number of adult actions, yet they can remain childish. I believe Paul's reference to childish ways applies to three major areas. One, the way we have been taught to communicate with those around us. Two, the way we have learned to process information coming to us. And three, the way we organize our world. And so it says, let's look at each of these areas in greater detail. So as I got to communicating with those around us, it was interesting. So I want to just put it here because we like to give messages to each other and, try to find social media as a way to communicate. So it says each of us has learned his or her own individual way of communicating, both verbally and non verbally. Like people think that folks don't know when you're offending them because you're not talking verbally. You're being offensive non-verbally, and it still is the same color, okay, on the face. So whether you do it verbally or non-verbally, being offensive has the same color, okay. So children in particular tend to communicate non-verbally, especially with adults. This book is basically about us still being childish in our adulthood. So it's going to give us an example of, as a child, how our behavior carry on into adulthood. So this is how this will happen in an adult situation, because as adults, we still do not know how to communicate with those up around us. We still don't know how to process information coming to us, and we still don't know how to organize our world. Okay, so that's children like behavior. So it says children in particular tend to communicate non-verbally, especially with adults. They don't have the confidence, maturity, and verbal skills to sit down and have an in-depth discussion with parents or other adults. So they find other methods of communication, nonverbal ways to persuade, complain, express feelings, and so forth. And then the author says, I know I did. So he spoke as a child. I learned to communicate by using my emotions. These are an example. My specialty was sadness. I could do sad until the flowers wilted. Well, at least until my mother gave in. For example, I remember wanting to see the first episode of Have Gun Will Travel, a program of obvious cultural importance to a child growing up in the Wild West of Oklahoma. The only problem was that my parents didn't seem to share my intense desire to see this show, and the only television available to us was 3 miles away at my grandparents' house. It didn't take long for me to conclude that my verbal plea was falling on deaf ears. However, I was far from through. I took my beat up rubber ball and trudged off to play a little solitary basketball. Solitary means by himself. I had nailed a coffee can with the ends cut out to the side of the tool shed. Fortunately for me, it was strategically placed where my mother would be sure to see me. I emitted sad feelings that would have rated at least an 8 or 9 on a 10-point pity meter. Sure enough, my mother couldn't stand it. She gave in, and that night I happily watched my program. So he said my method of communication was effective during childhood. So I tended to communicate the same way as an adult. Instead of verbalizing, I wanted people to understand what I wanted people to understand, especially if they had made me angry or sad. I was simply emoted. And this is an extremely dysfunctional way of relating to others. An extremely dysfunctional way. Emotions may continue to get results, but they don't communicate thoughts or needs. As a child, my tactic wasn't necessarily a bad one. It was probably the only way I could convince my parents, who tended to be insensitive to my needs, to respond to me. But as an adult, I needed to put that childish way behind me. Now that's dope.